Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be looking ahead into game week 29. Of course, it is a blank game week, so not as many teams as usual are going to be playing. We're going to go and build a free hit team for you and suggest a few different assets we think you should be considering if you are using a free hit this week.
Yeah, big week in the FPL calendar. Our first blank of the season. It's going to be interesting to see how this pans out. If you don't know already, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and Liverpool all blank in this game week due to the EFL Cup final. So that leaves us with some decent assets still to pick from. Obviously, a lot of managers will probably have a lot of those players that I've just mentioned from those teams. Hence why we've got a free hit draft this week. Just for consensus, me and Ben both won't be playing our free hits in 29. We are saving it for a little bit later in the season. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea to play it. If you've got, 8, 9 players out of your usual team, then I'd probably would advise playing it. Equally, though, if you have about 6 or 7, I think I'd maybe even consider taking a couple of hits just so you can get through this week. Because there will be bigger and more challenging blank game weeks on the horizon. So, yeah, we'll get cracking into the team to start things off. Got Matt Sells, first of all, in goal, Ipswich away this week, doubled up with Milankovic of Ipswich away. I think for me, if I was playing the free hit this week, I would try and double up on at least one defence and try and put your eggs into one basket, so to speak, just because it's the way you're going to get a little bit more differential away from those people who don't have the free hit. Myself and Ben will probably have a Forest defender in our teams, like most people do already. So having a double down on that will really increase the gains if they are to keep a clean sheet, which for me I think is quite likely away at Ipswich, despite them being, probably one of the better attacking teams out of the relegation teams. I still think there's a clean sheet on offer, especially with how good Forest defence is. Nuri, Southampton away, I think is another good fixture there. Again, you could potentially double up on that Wolves defence if you really fancied it. He carries good attacking threat. Obviously, 4.8 million, so slightly more expensive than someone like Agbadu, who's another option on the bench at 4 million. And then Gvardiol, obviously, he's 5.9 million. For me, I don't think you need Gvardiol this week. Brighton at home, I could easily see Brighton scoring at the Etihad. But it's the attacking threat that Gvardiol carries as well. He's the highest scoring or goal scoring defender in the league this season. So, yeah, there's the consensus of the defence, Ben. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I think the option of going on a double up on the defence is definitely something that I'd be considering. If you're not looking at Ipswich as the sort of fixture you're attacking from a Nottingham Forest perspective, of course, Forest this season have been good overall, but in terms of how they've looked so far in 2025, not as great as in sort of previous weeks. So yeah, you could even look at the Manchester City double up in defence if you're fairly secure on them keeping a clean sheet. Or alternatively, there's not like a plethora of fixtures where you anticipate clean sheets coming. You could maybe look towards the Everton defence as well. Arsenal against Chelsea, that's a fixture potentially that could be quite scrappy. So yeah, it's all about capitalising on those clean sheets. I don't think there's going to be many this game week at all, just because a lot of the fixtures seem to be a lot of attacking teams and a lot of sort of teams that aren't necessarily typically keep clean sheets. So yeah, a double up in defence is definitely advised. So moving on into the midfield, and I think there is a bit of a formula when you're going into the midfield, one of which is to have a Bournemouth midfielder. Of course, that's going to be between Cliver and Semenyo. So having one of them in your team for the free hit 29 is going to be very important. You could go differential again and double up on those two midfielders if you think Bournemouth are going to get goals against Brentford. I see that being a fairly high scoring game, which is why, of course, we've got Mburmo in that as well. Cole Palmer is a consideration to maybe potentially not even have in your team for this game week, just based on the form that he is in. However, for the free hit, I think there's an element that you've got to really attack the game week, but I also think you've got to have the security of Cole Palmer. Every single player in FPL that's not using the free hit will have Cole Palmer. I think he'll be, a similar level of ownership, 80 to 90% at most levels. So to not have him in would be very risky. And then Bruno Fernandes, of course, it seems to be very consistent this season in terms of his returns. So I'd highly recommend having him in as well. Outside of that, again, there isn't like loads of options you can look towards. Of course, we've got Jared Bowen on the bench, who is definitely a consideration. This video is being recorded before his Monday night game, so he could haul and then be the sort of bandwagon pick for that. But Josh, any other thoughts on midfielders?
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's quite open. Obviously, there's no inclusion of a City midfielder here, mainly due to rotation. Obviously, we saw Marmoush get benched at the weekend. I think that could happen to any one of them. I am intrigued personally by Savinho. I think he's had quite a few starts in a row. He's got good minutes so far this season. So if I was looking to a City midfielder, I'd probably look to him. I know a few would be interested in like maybe an Erdegaard, but not Bowen. We already talked about him. Son and Foden. For me, I think they're one slightly too expensive. I don't think budget will be an issue, but for me, I think you could get better value picks and probably more consistent picks, like you mentioned with Kluivert. Obviously, Kluivert's one of those ones that I probably would have over Semenyo just because of the EO. Like he's stupidly high owned at the moment. Obviously, got the penalties as well, and it seems like he just keeps ticking over with those returns. Whereas Semenyo probably has a higher ceiling. But yeah, just not as maybe consistent as Kluivert. So for me, that's why he's in there. I think it's interesting in midfield because you could really go with whoever you fancy. Like Bruno Fernandes is not like a must-have pick, but equally he's been pretty consistent the last few weeks, getting goals from low XG opportunities, so not really showing up in the stats. So it should be interesting. I think no free hit team will be the same in terms of their midfielders, in my opinion. Okay, and then to round off the team, we're obviously going to have the forward line. I think two of these guys really do pick themselves, and that is Chris Wood and Erling Haaland. Obviously, Wood's got the Ipswich away fixture. These are the types of fixtures that he's been hauling in the past. Obviously, he's off the back of, I think, 3 blanks in a row now, if I'm not mistaken. So not great form, but equally he has faced some of the toughest teams in the division in that time. I thought he looked pretty dangerous, to be fair, against City. Unlucky not to get a return there. Erling Haaland, for me, if you're free hitting, has to be in there. The upside of him playing, he's been fairly consistent, to be honest, in their last few games, picking up returns here and there. For me, I'm trying to get him into my team anyway. And I think if you are going to free hit, captaincy probably does have to lie with him, just because I don't really see a standout elsewhere. You can maybe argue Fernandes against Leicester, but we've seen Leicester, even against Chelsea, put on a decent defensive display when they played that 5-back formation. And then to round things off, we do have Evan Nilsson here. Obviously, he's off the back of a return against Spurs, just come back into the team. I think overall he's decent. I would be tempted by Beto as well at 5.1 million. Obviously, he's got the penalties. He's averaging some crazy XG per game since coming into the team after the Brighton game for Everton. So he's a definite consideration. And I wouldn't really look at his price tag either, because if he was to be repriced right now, I think he'd be around 6.5 million. So yeah, I think I'd take that with a pinch of salt, and he could be a very good consideration for this week with that West Ham at home fixture. Is there anyone else you consider for a forward line, Ben? Obviously, we lost Cunha due to suspension. He's probably that shoe-in third one if we could, right?
Yeah, Cunha would be the guy that you'd go for if he didn't have that suspension. But for me, potentially Visser, just off the back that, the Bournemouth game isn't the worst one in the world. And if you don't have Mbeumo, then it might be some good Brentford coverage. But outside of maybe sort of 4 or 5 strikers, maybe Marmoush, if you're really sort of thinking he's going to get a couple of starts in a row. But again, we just don't know. So there's a couple of standouts, but outside of that scope, I don't think you need to stray too far from the template on this one.
Okay then, so that wraps up our Gameweek 29 free hit draft. Let us know what you think about the free hit in the comments. Are you going to be playing it this week, and who would you be going with in those midfield and forward positions?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. And like Josh said, comment below your free hit teams. And as always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never make me